It's hard to overstate the immense importance of bees to food crops worldwide. You have a bee to thank for one of every 3 bites of food you eat, up to 90% of the world's nutrition. So, how significant is the ongoing bee decline to worldwide food security? And could we be doing more to ensure their long term survival? Dr. James Nye is Associate Dean, Division of Biological Sciences, and Professor in the section of Ecology, Behavior, and Evolution at UC San Diego. His research focuses on bee communication and bee health. And Dr. Nye, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
So, there's evidence that bees have actually been around millions of years, but have been on the decline since the 1940s. Some estimates say the reduction is as great as 50%. How bad is it? Have we reached a tipping point?
Well, in terms of our honeybee population, I would say they're in no danger of going into extinction. We are reaching a tipping point in the sense that it takes a lot of money to support the health of our honeybees, which are so vital for our crops, as you mentioned. But I think we are reaching a tipping point, unfortunately, in the mass extinction that's going on, which is largely centered around what humans are doing: habitat loss, chemicals, all of the same things that are affecting our honeybees are also affecting native bees, but no one's actually looking out for them or helping them with their diseases.
Well, that's an important point because honeybees aren't the only pollinators. So there's wild and there's domestic. Is it a 50-50 proposition when it comes to pollination? And are the declines in the managed bee population, how do they compare to those in the wild?
So I think we're still getting more data on that. There are, unfortunately, the news is not good. Every time we do a new study, we find that there is greater loss than we suspect. But in terms of who's responsible for pollinating different crops, in different parts of the world, you have native bees that will play a role in crop pollination. Many people have not heard of stingless bees, but these are these wonderful bees that don't actually have stingers. They are native to much of the old world and the new world in the tropics, and they can play a role in pollinating coffee and things like that. So there are these native reservoirs of bees that are useful for crops and also for native plants. Um, I would say most of the pollination around the earth is not done by honeybees. And here I'm talking not just about agricultural, but about all the different plants that are important. So honeybees probably have a smaller share of that. But in terms of agricultural crops, especially in the United States, it really primarily is up to honeybees. And in some cases, the reason for that is that the native bees that would have pollinated these crops aren't as present anymore.
Well, it's interesting because much of the produce that we do buy from the grocery store and nuts as well are pollinated by millions of domestic honeybees that actually go on tour every year, beginning in February and starting with the almonds in California. So, worth an estimated $20 billion a year in the US alone to food crops. So, historically, has it always been this way, or were the native bees more responsible for pollination in the past? And what is the impact on the health of the bees doing all this touring around?
So historically, this is a shift, and this is a shift exactly as you mentioned when we started to see decline in bees because we have this massive agriculture that really requires these bees. And you might think, and I kind of thought naively at one point, like, well, why can't the almond growers just have beehives there to pollinate their almonds and then they don't have to ship them around? And the answer is, what do the bees eat when the almond blossoms are gone? And therefore, we have this route where the bees are trucked from California to other states to different crops, and they really do a cycle before they end up, many of them, in the Midwest or back at home with their growers so that they can actually be sustained. There's not a single crop that can provide all the food that these bees need. Now, what's really interesting is you asked about the transportation. New studies have shown that air pollution, diesel fumes, can actually destroy floral odors and prevent bees from smelling things properly. And they need that sense of smell because the reason why flowers have odors is to help attract their insect pollinators. So that's very important for bees. We also have other evidence as well because when bees are moving around, they are disoriented. And when they're unpacked from their crates and placed in front of a new crop, bees from one colony will become disoriented, and end in the neighboring colony. And in many cases, that neighboring colony is stacked on a pallet, so it's just a couple of feet away. Now, normally that's not a problem, but what if that bee was sick and had a disease or had a parasite? And therefore, these things in these dense conglomerations of bee colonies can spread.
Well, and it's fascinating that after they do all this traveling and touring around, they go back home and start making honey. You begin to know where busy as a bee actually comes from. It's also a fascinating fact that they live longer in the winter than in the summer, but there are also significant losses in colonies over the winter months. Is their ability to survive winter an indicator of overall health?
Yes, their ability to survive winter is a reflection normally of the amount of food that they've managed to store, right? And a good beekeeper will leave enough honey for his bees to actually survive over the winter. In the past, we've done some practices where we fed them with sugar or corn syrup and things like that, and they can convert that into honey. But what we're learning is amazing. Honey has amazing properties that are good for bees. Honey is healthy for bees. Isn't that surprising? And so is pollen, and so is having a diverse diet. So all of these things are very important. And when they don't have enough food, enough good nutrition from diverse food sources, they can suffer. Most of the colony losses that occur are during the winter, and this is a major problem.
Well, and it is not just one thing that is killing bees, it's a variety of factors, and they all seem to intersect and interact. What are the primary causes right now?
So there are multiple causes, and one good thing to know is that what was called colony collapse disorder was thought to be a mystery, but it actually is no longer really a mystery because we know the factors. So on one, we have nutrition, which I've touched upon. We have the management practices of bees, moving them around, exposing them to pollution, things like this. And then we have the pesticides, right? When they are being exposed to crops, some of those crops might not have insecticides, but even things like fungicides can negatively impact bees. So there are the different chemicals that they're exposed to. And we also have varroa. This is a kind of mite that infects bee colonies, and it will spread diseases like viruses. Now, varroa is very resistant to all of the treatments that we give to it because its physiology is in some ways similar to that of bees. If we try to poison the mite, we're also to some extent going to poison the bees. And this kind of leads into this chemical syndrome that we're talking about. Um, so we have pathogens, we have the varroa, we have nutrition, and we have the management practices of moving these bees around. But the final factor is kind of the X factor in all of this. These things interact. So imagine if you went to your medicine cabinet and just randomly pulled out different medications and drugs and started eating them. Not only would that be a terrible idea, but there would be interactions. You know, you see on the labels that say, do not take this medication with this medication. We are exposing bees to hundreds of different chemicals, and we have not tested all the possible interactions. Moreover, these build up in the wax that is stored inside the bee colony. Many of them are fat soluble. And so not only do we have that particular bee foraging and being exposed, the future generations which are going to be reared in those wax cells can also be exposed. And this is one of the reasons why beekeepers are recommended to get rid of wax and have the bees start from scratch as often as possible.
Sounds like multiple issues requiring multiple solutions. What are the potential solutions? Your work at UC San Diego is leading the charge in many respects. Have you seen examples of interventions that are yielding positive results?
I think the good news, and thank you, it's very flattering. I wouldn't say we're leading the charge, but I think we are part of a group of researchers who are really trying to think, what can we do? We can't eliminate all the chemicals in the environment, as much as it would be probably good for our health as well. They're part of this green new world where we have to grow enough food to feed the population of the earth. So what can we do for bees that have been exposed to these deleterious compounds? Well, there's exciting new research on mushrooms, on fungi. And some of you may actually have heard or be taking a supplement based upon an Asian mushroom called Ganoderma. And those mushroom extracts have been found in the lab and even in the field tests with colonies to actually help colonies that have been exposed to pesticides. Because bees do, like other animals, have inherent detoxifying mechanisms. And what we want to try to do is support that and help them detoxify. There are also some other things which actually seem a little bit strange, but many people may have heard about red light therapy, which is known to activate your mitochondria. And in generating this cellular energy, they may also be helping to detoxify. Some studies show that red light can help bumblebees that have been exposed to pesticides. And there are people who are doing some pilot experiments on that right now. The other thing that we're really focused on in our lab right now is looking at nutrition. We know that bees need a well-balanced diet of different pollens. And in fact, the more we learn, the more amazed we are at how smart and adaptive they are. If bees are foraging on one pollen that is deficient in a nutrient that they need, the colony is able to sense that, and they will direct foraging for other pollens that compensate, and so they have well-balanced nutrition. Now, obviously, this is a problem if they only have one kind of tree or plant that they can visit and collect pollen from, and when we've reduced the habitat diversity, so there are fewer wildflowers that they can collect from. But we're interested in exploring whether supplementation with omega fatty acids might actually help bees much as it does with us, because surprisingly, we know that omega fatty acids are involved in longevity and even brain health in a wide variety of animals, including bees.
Well, it's really encouraging to hear some of the positive steps forward in research. What about us as individuals? Hobby farming and gardening seems to be back in a big way, and the pandemic certainly increased interest in that. Are there signs of hope from farmers, from gardeners? Are people listening? What can we do to help to make a difference?
You touched upon a great point. There has been such a resurgence in interest in gardening and beekeeping. And it's also kind of led to some tensions. And I think that what we can all do in being amateur beekeepers or professional beekeepers is to keep our bees healthy. For professionals, that's their livelihood, and so they have to do that. For people who are just starting out, I would encourage people to join their local beekeeping club, to read the online resources, and really keep your bees healthy. After all, no one wants to keep even a hobbyist sick bees, but you need to watch out for varroa mite. You need to understand some of the natural treatments that are available to help bees. For example, if you allow your bees to keep their propolis, it will actually keep them more disease-free, and they will actually live a little bit longer because they're not trying to fight off those pathogens. They're letting the natural propolis, that's that black sticky stuff that you get around colonies, and is actually even sold as medication for cold sores for humans. So I think the key thing is make sure that you monitor your bees, that they're healthy. You're going to have to think about chemical use at some point, but there are gentler things like formic acid that you can use to help knock down the mites. But being a responsible beekeeper is something that I think is good in the long run, and I don't think anyone would argue with that.
And does it help? Does it help to plant bee loving plants and flowers in the backyard, to keep the ground cover a little bit later in the spring, to adopt a hive? Any of these initiatives help?
Definitely, you can go and take a look at multiple websites like the Xerxes Society that talk about the importance of ground cover. There's even a movement, Marla Spivak is an important part of this, where she's encouraging people to rethink grass. And how about a meadow? Wouldn't you love to have a natural meadow with native plants that attracts the birds, the butterflies, and the bees? And these are all things that can be done. Research is now underway by utility companies. You know that we have these right-of-ways where they have the power lines and they have to be mowed periodically. But not only that, they could be supplemented with seed mixes that will help native pollinators and help wildlife. So there's a lot that everyone can do, whether you're working for a company or at home. But yes, trying to plant native plants that are drought tolerant, that don't require chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and will help support your native ecosystem. That's a great thing.
Dr. Nye, it's a great thing talking to you today. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your perspectives on bees and their future.
Thank you very much.